All right, y'all. You're locked on Falcons. I'm your host, Aaron Freeman, and today we are reviewing the All-22 film from the Falcons' Week 4 win over the Cleveland Browns. We'll be talking all about how and why the running game worked. We'll be talking about Marcus Mariota's struggles and be answering your listener questions, including where was Kyle Pitts in all of this success on Sunday? What are my thoughts on the rookie class and the linebackers? We'll get into all of that and more on today's Locked On Falcons.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me. I'm Aaron Freeman, the humble host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, aka Sirius Black, aka Mr. Drew. And of course, we thank you guys for checking out Locked On Falcons as your first listen. And today's episode of Locked On Falcons is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster, and you can post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. And guys, of course, Locked On Falcons is free and available Monday through Friday on a variety of podcast platforms, including Apple, Odyssey, Google, Spotify, and YouTube. Make sure you check us out on YouTube, hit that bell, give us a like, and you will get the video version of the podcast the night before the audio drops. And so we are on hump day, as most of you guys are listening to the audio version of this Tuesday evening, if you're checking us out on YouTube. And we do what we do every single week, which is we break down the All-22 film from the previous week. And today, not any as in-depth as previous weeks. There's some specific aspect that I really wanted to dive deep into. Today, we'll start off talking about the run game, then we'll move to Mariota, and then we'll answer your listener questions. But obviously, talking about how and why the run game worked and looking specifically at that 14-play stretch at the end of the third quarter and going into the fourth quarter, where the Falcons had a 100% success rate on all 14 runs, ran for 145 yards combined on those 14 plays. I look at that stretch of plays and I didn't see anything profound, anything, the scheme and the Falcons did this and they countered with this. No, it was just basically, as I've often said, when it comes to why and how the run game works or doesn't work, it's about execution. Right? You got your blockers getting a hat on a hat. You find the running backs hitting daylight, all that stuff and more, and the offense is executing. You can run the football. When the defense isn't executing, they struggle to stop the run. And to me, that stretch of plays was exactly how Arthur Smith in this outside zone based run scheme sort of is supposed to look, how you draw it up. You got guys flying out there on those second level blocks and creating those creases and cutback lanes. And you have the running backs putting their foot in the dirt and making that cut and finding daylight. And all five guys up front did their jobs. And I think particularly during that stretch of plays, I think that was really the key for them. In addition to additional blockers like Keith Smith and Parker Hesse, I think really did an outstanding job hitting their blocks. You had really good downfield blocks from Kyle Pitts and Drake London and Kadero Hodge and others. Basically, again, it was execution. Everybody was doing their job. And you look at Chris Lindstrom and his, really high PFF grade that we talked about on yesterday's episode, and earning a 97 run blocking grade. And probably the bulk of that high grade came on that 10-play stretch. And I'll probably wind up putting a highlight clip of some of his better blocks in this Browns game. And certainly a handful, the majority of those blocks will probably come from that 10 to 14 play stretch of plays. But if you want to get further into the film, I think DJ Shockley over at AtlantaFalcons.com always does a great job breaking down the film every Tuesday on YouTube and over at the official site. And that video is 7 minutes and 4 plays breaking down, all the execution stuff. So if you just want to see that stuff in action and really do hear and see a good job of breaking that, I'll link to that video in probably the description below. But go check out DJ Shockley's video to break that down. But of course, a lot of people are going to look at that and say, yeah, they did it against the Browns. And we know that the Browns weren't necessarily before this week a great run defense. And certainly with a depleted front with some of their starters like Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett and Taven Bryan out, they were even more depleted and more lackluster up front. So, hey, the Falcons did it against the Browns, but what's the big deal? Can they do it against future opponents? And that's going to be the big question, right? You dominate the Browns, that's great and wonderful, but how are you going to fare against the Bucks, the 49ers, the Bengals, teams that we've been talking about quite a bit over the past week about how the Falcons fare against them? And we're going to really learn about how good this team is. It's one thing to do it against a bottom 10 defense or bottom 5 defense like the Browns, but can you do it against a top 5 or top 10 defense like the 49ers, like the Bucks, etc.? And I saw someone on Twitter, and I responded to a tweet by Kevin Knight over at the Falcoholic, and I can't remember exactly what Kevin said, but basically I echoed these sentiments like we're going to find out about this football team against these quality defenses over the next 3 games. And someone responded to that and was like, well, not with Mariota at the quarterback position. And I'm like, yeah, I think they can find out quite a bit about what this offense is capable, and particularly this running game, because that's the foundation of this football team. And frankly, the quarterback doesn't have that much to do with the running game. Again, now if the Falcons get back to doing more of that rollout stuff that they were doing in week 1, where Mariota had a significant impact on the rushing success, then sure, the quarterback can have an impact on that. But we haven't really seen that as much the last couple of weeks. And so to me, the question for me is, you got 200 against the Saints, you got 200 against the Browns, and 100 plus against some of the other teams. Can you get 100 plus against the Bucks, who are 17th in DVOA in terms of run defense, right? Can you do it against the 49ers, who are first in run defensive DVOA, and the Bengals 7th currently in run defensive DVOA? And we'll see if the Falcons can pull that off. And that's what's going to be interesting about these next upcoming games is like these teams are going to know what's coming, right? They know the Falcons are going to want to run the football, right? And they're going to key on it, and they're going to try to stop the run, and they're going to try to put this game in Marcus Mariota's hands to go out there and throw the ball in order to win the game. They want the Falcons, from that perspective, to play left-handed, so to speak. The old Belichick, he's going to take away your biggest strength and force you to play left-handed. And the question put forward for the Falcons, for me at least, and I'm sure for many of you, is, are the Falcons good enough up front, as they seem to be against the Browns, to basically still be able to play right-handed against some of these better defenses? Again, you can play right-handed all you want against some of these bad defenses, but can you do it against the good teams? And that's what we're going to find out. And that's ultimately what this rebuild is about. I know, again, we're riding high on the last 2 wins and the 2-game winning streak. And hey, this team is going places, and this team is surprising folks, and maybe this team's a playoff team and all that stuff and more. But I haven't forgotten that, hey, we're in a rebuild, and emphasis on the build part. Like, how much of this unit has been built? How much of this foundation has been laid? And the thing I will sit here and tell you guys, hey, I feel like this foundation is a lot more stable. And I'm looking mainly at you guys in the trenches and the offensive line in particular in this conversation. That foundation seems a lot more stable today based off of these first 4 games than what we saw, or what I believed we would see, a month or 2 ago. And so that's a positive sign, but we're still building towards that. Again, it's about, checking these boxes, and we're going to really get tested, and that stability, that foundation is going to get tested over these next couple of games. And going back to the checking boxes, like how many of these 5 offensive linemen are going to be part of an offensive line that can get 100, 120, 130 yards against the Bucks, against the Bengals, against the 49ers? Should we be finding ourselves facing those teams at some point in the month of January, or even February, at some point in the not too distant or distant future? How many of these offensive linemen are going to be around that can provide that? And we're going to find that out over the next couple of games. So if the Falcons check those boxes, if we're checking 3, 4, 5 of those boxes in terms of valuable offensive linemen that can allow us to play right-handed against these quality defenses, we are, things are really, really looking up for this team. That foundation is a lot more stable than, haters like myself, aka Mr. Drew, that negative Nancy, was willing to give credit for this team during the course of the summer. So I'm excited. I can't wait. I'm the Bart Scott gif of I can't wait to see what happens over these next couple of games. I'm excited to see what happens, and can't also wait to see what happens over the next 3 games that could wind up defining this team's season in a lot of ways. And part of that is going to be particularly how Marcus Mariota fares. And we'll get into that conversation as we continue today's episode, guys. But as the Falcons are looking to check those boxes to see which of these offensive linemen are going to help them win this fall, you may be looking to find the right people that can help your small business fire on all cylinders this fall as well. And LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier for you to find the right people that you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes at LinkedIn.com and reach the world's largest professional market of over 800 million people. That's almost as many yards as the Falcons had in the fourth quarter against the Browns. LinkedIn Jobs is going to help you spread the word that you're hiring, give you those simple tools like screening questions to make it easy for you to focus on the candidates that have the right experience and the right skills so that you can prioritize who you want to hire, who you want to interview. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering those quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs is going to help you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. All you got to do is post your job LinkedIn.com/locked on NFL. That's LinkedIn.com/locked on NFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, guys, I want to thank you again for making Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. And I'm very excited to see what happens for the rest of the season. And you guys should be excited to make Locked On NFL your second listen. Locked On Falcons is your first listen, but Locked On NFL is your second listen each and every day, and especially on Friday, where you can get the NFL key predictions, where the local experts are breaking down the 5 biggest games each and every weekend, including the Sunday and Monday night games. So check them out by subscribing to Locked On NFL, available in the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. So, as I said at the top of the episode, there wasn't a whole lot of profound things, new developments that I saw in this Browns game that we haven't discussed kind of at points before in the first 3 weeks. Again, we'll sort of see what new developments happen, but let's talk a little bit about the quarterback situation. That has been created quite a bit of controversy and conversation online since Sunday, given the concerns about Marcus Mariota's performance. And, going back and watching the film, I didn't think Mariota played particularly well, right? So big surprise there. Oh, Aaron, you're really dropping knowledge, man. The guy that went 7 for 19 didn't play well. Gasp, right? So really, when it comes down to Marcus Mariota, and to me, this Browns game showed some of the issues I have with Mariota. There's 2 big beefs that I have with Mariota that I've discussed. One of them I've discussed quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, which is the lack of precision, the lack of poise and accuracy and pocket management and decision-making when it comes to him being a pocket passer. But that's not really Marcus Mariota's game. Really, where that issue comes to the forefront, to me, is in the red zone. That's when you need your guy to make the throws, right? Because now you're taking points off the board. You're settling for 3 instead of getting 7, right? And that can be the difference, as we well know, can be the difference between winning and losing games. I'm not expecting Mariota to be, this precise poised pocket passer, on a 2nd and 12 at the 38-yard line. But when you get to the 8-yard line, when it gets to the 12-yard line, I need you to make those throws. And that's to me going to continue to be an area that I'm going to be critical of if it continues to manifest itself as it has a number of times so far this season. And the second issue I have with Mariota is, to me, more like that's, again, the pocket precision stuff is not something that's a strength of his game, but the strength of his game really is, basically what I've referred to as the Mariota coaster, right? Where you're going to get these highs, you're going to get these lows, and it's the ability to sort of create off structure. And I put out one of these plays on Twitter, so I'll probably link to that in the comments below. But I put out a play where Mariota was able to extend outside the pocket and make a play and throw the ball to Parker Hesse for a 22-yard gain, and that led to the next play, Cordero Patterson's score. And those are the plays, those are the highs of the Mariota coaster. Those are the plays that you expect Marcus Mariota to play. Again, he's never been this precision passer. That's never been his game, right? His game is he's going to be more of that gunslinger type. I'm going to use my legs to extend plays outside the pocket, and I'm going to find and locate open receivers down the field. He did that again later in this game with the Olamide Zaccheaus big play where he got outside the pocket and then floated up that ball to Zaccheaus for a big 40-plus yard gain. And there were a couple opportunities at other points in this game, whether it was throwing the Pitts, whether it was throwing to London and other guys, where he couldn't quite connect on those throws. And those are the plays I really wanted to see Marcus Mariota make, right? Like, that's the strength of his game. Those are the plays that he needs to be making more consistently. And I think there have been times at points this season, not so much again in this Browns game, but earlier in the season, where it felt like he was a little bit too quick to run rather than keeping his eyes downfield to make those throws. And then again in this Browns game, he made two of those plays to Hesse and Zaccheaus, but then he missed some of those throws. And it's like, okay, like, if you can make those plays, I can live with the dips, the valleys, the lows of the Mariota coaster as this thing goes up and down, because the highs are there. And those are the plays that Mariota can make that other players, that we could have starting in the lineup, or other quarterbacks that we could have around the league or in previous years aren't necessarily making. So, but when you're not getting those peaks and all you're just getting is the valleys, the lack of precision, the lack of all these various things that we've discussed ad nauseum at this point in time, you're suffering a net loss. It doesn't balance in your favor in the way that you want. And so, unlike my colleague Mark Zeno here on Locked On Sports Atlanta, I don't think the quarterback conversation or the quarterback controversy is dead. I do agree with him that nothing is imminent on that front, but I don't think it's dead. It's put on the back burner, right? And that back burner is set to low, right? The stove is still on, but it's not gonna, it may not necessarily catch the house on fire. And where this team is a month from now, I think will determine just how much more heat is turned up on the stove, so to speak. So for example, if the Falcons were to, I don't know, go 0-3 over the next 3 weeks, I think that conversation about Mariota and his grip on the starting spot is going to be very different 3 weeks from now or a month from now than it is today. Again, that burner is going to be much hotter in that, that hot seat, so to speak. If they can manage to win some of the games over the next couple of weeks, right? That's going to be interesting, right? Because part of the reason why the Falcons might lose the next 3 games, and again, I'm not saying this to be negative, we're spitballing, we're being hypothetical here, right? If they were to lose the next 3 games, part of the reason why you might think that would happen is because, going back to what we just talked about, is those teams, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, Cincinnati, were successful at making the Falcons play left-handed. Either they were able to shut down the run game, or the Falcons defense, continuing to look a little lackluster against some of those high-powered offense, or at least those offenses that at least have the potential to be high-powered. And it kind of forced the Falcons to play from behind. It forced the Falcons to have to abandon the run game a lot earlier than they wanted to, and then that puts the onus on a player like Mariota to play that left-handed style of football, which is a pass first. And if he is incapable of showing that he can play, and throw the ball, and this team can move the ball and score points, if he's throwing the ball 35, 40 or more times a game, I do think that could potentially prompt a change at the quarterback position, going back to the conversation about whether the quarterback controversy is dead. So I think the next 3 games are really going to help define not only his season and the rest of this team season, because if the Falcons are successful at playing right-handed over the next couple of games, and they're able to successfully dictate how they want to play against some of these quality defenses, then I think that's going to tell us that, if they can do it for the next 3 games, then they probably should be able to do it for the vast majority of the remaining 10 games of the season. We'll see how that plays out, hopefully in the Falcons' favor with multiple wins there. But if they can't, then I do certainly think, those final 10 or so games may prompt some changes, and one of them could be at the quarterback position. So again, I'm excited to see what this team is capable of bringing to the table. If they can achieve that, if they can play right-handed, or do they wind up being forced to play left-handed over the next couple of games, because that's going to me, dictate how the rest of this season goes. And I'm also excited to answer some of your listener questions. We'll get into a conversation about Kyle Pitts, the linebacker play, the safety play, the fullbacks. We'll answer all of that and more as we continue today's episode here, guys. But before we get there, I want to tell you about the number one source for all your football betting needs this season, and that is, of course, betonline.net. You can find all the latest player developments, matchups, news, podcasts, in-depth articles, analysis of every game, including this weekend's game where the Falcons are facing the Bucs, and 8.5-point underdogs in that game. And BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, whether it's live in-game betting or you just want those up-to-minute scores for every sport out there, whether it's the NFL, MLB, college football, MMA, boxing, golf, and so much more. Just head to the website right now at betonline.net. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online, where the game starts. So, guys, as I'm excited to answer your listener questions, I'm also excited to tell you about the new Locked On Sports Atlanta app, available if you have Roku and Amazon Fire TV. So if you're looking to see this pretty handsome face on your television screen, download the Locked On Sports Atlanta app today on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. So our first question comes from Budget Baller at I Am Sharpie on Twitter. He says, gonna go ahead and ask my question for the film review now. Where the heck is Pitts, covered or on the sideline? And he asked this question in the third quarter of the Browns game. So as I've said before, you got to get those questions in as early as possible. First come, first serve. Pitts wasn't targeted much in this game. He got targeted 4 times, but he only ran 12 routes, and that's a target rate of 25%, which if you've listened to the podcast the last couple of weeks, we talked about, that's a good number for a high-level tight end. Kelsey and Waller and all those guys are being targeted about 20-25%. And so the issue obviously is Pitts didn't run that many routes. The expectation that for a lot of people, including the fantasy folks, is that instead of running 12 routes in a game, he's going to run 30 or 40 routes in a game. And that's been created a lot of consternation and frustration among fantasy fans and certainly Falcon fans alike. But, I do think Pitts was contributing to this team, especially on that opening drive. To me, he was creating opportunities for other receivers even when he wasn't getting the ball. That deep ball to Damiere Byrd, that I think was by and large created by Kyle Pitts pulling away the coverage. He ran a crossing route that pulled both of the deep safeties, the Browns were in cover 2, down on to cover him on the crossing route, and that opened up Damiere Byrd wide open, one-on-one on the outside on a skinny post, and I just think Mariota kind of missed the throw, and Byrd certainly didn't do a great job tracking the ball in that situation. So then you had a couple of plays later in the drive on that big third down conversion for Tyler Algier. It was both Pitts and London, kind of with vertical routes, some outbreaking routes there, pulling away the coverage and creating that void in the defense in the flat that we saw Algier leaking into, and he catching the ball and getting a 20-yard gain to continue that scoring drive for the Falcons. And so again, Pitts is contributing even in situations where he's not being targeted. But again, when you look at the actual targets that he had, he did have 1 catch for 25 yards early in the game. Then there was 1 pass that I think was just a miss on Mariota's part, and then there were 2 broken up by defenders. And based off of that, you could say, okay, well, he was covered, right? And then you could also make the case that, yeah, he was also on the sideline quite a bit because he only played about 60% of the snaps in this game. In the first 2 weeks, he was playing closer to 90% of the snaps. So that works out to be, if he played 90% of the snaps in this game, it's about a dozen or more snaps that he was not on the field. So, so I guess that answers your question, Budget Baller. Our next question comes from Mark Reimers at Mark Reimers 5. While you're watching the film, can you please count how many tackles Walker missed? I know he was around the ball a lot, but geez, it has to be a high number of missed tackles. I know PFF had him at 3 missed tackles. I know of 3 in coverage alone. I wasn't tracking his missed tackles in run support. So if we assume that at least it was 1 or 2 in run support, let's say it was 3 plus, right? But I didn't see your question mark before I watched the film. I only saw it afterwards. So my bad for not counting the missed tackles in run support. But I actually don't want to know what that number was. How many times Nick Chubb was breaking tackles. So let's not find out. Let's just say 3 plus. AJE sends in an email. He asks, we have talked about the offensive line exceeding expectations, but we haven't heard much on Keith Smith. How has he blocked so far? Also, it's funny that the Falcons are winning because they are fast and physical, the Dan Quinn special. Keith Smith, I thought, was kind of lackluster. It wasn't really bringing a whole lot to the table the first couple of games, but certainly I think in the Cleveland Browns game, made a big impact and was a big part of why the Falcons running game was as successful. One of the things I've noticed so far this year is the Falcons are getting Parker Hesse a lot of opportunities to be a blocker out of the backfield. I think he's been effective at times in that role, and they've kind of been interchangeable with how they've utilized Hesse and Smith. Now, Hesse spends the bulk of his time in line as a tight end, but about 10% of his snaps so far this season, according to PFF, have been in the backfield. And then you look at Keith Smith, who spends the bulk of his reps in the backfield, but has gotten about 30% of his snaps in line. So it's very clear to me that the Falcons are looking for more hybrid H-back, fullback, tight end type of players. And it'll be interesting to sort of see where Keith Smith's and the rest of his season goes. Is it more like the Browns game, or is it more like the sort of lackluster performances we saw those first couple of games of the season? Because Keith Smith is 30 years old. He's in a contract year. And, I think the Falcons could be looking to upgrade that position, or maybe asking Parker Hesse to take on more of that mantle possibly next year if we don't see more good games from Keith Smith moving forward. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out the rest of the season, because you could see certainly the Falcons looking for maybe a bigger, beefier H-back tight end type of player to replace Keith Smith next year if he doesn't continue on where he was in this Browns game. But obviously there's still a lot of football left to be played. Connor R's email asks, just curious what you're seeing out of the Doc, Arnold Ebiketie. It seems like there's been a few great plays, but it's also looked like there's plays where he's blowing up his man and disrupting plays that allow other guys to make plays as well. I think the Cleveland game again was his best game so far, similar to Keith Smith. He had 6 pressures, including 3 hits, according to Pro Football Focus. My charting also put, I counted those pressures as hurries and 3 quarterback hits. And as I mentioned, and we discussed kind of briefly on yesterday's episode, the concern was, how were those high quality hits and pressures? And they weren't really, right? One was a result of coverage on the back end. So basically a coverage pressure. 2 actually were due to him being unblocked on the play, including one on a screen pass. And another one was he was successfully able to kind of chase Brissett once he extended the play outside the pocket and sort of helped chase him down in that. And so I think Ebiketie has been, solid, but not great by any means. One of the things I did like seeing in this game is he tried to pull off a spin move. It wasn't effective. He got stonewalled on the play, but I like the fact that he's trying things. He's working things. He's trying different things, spin moves, bull rushes, all these various things. And so my hope is by year's end, you'll start to see some of these, these technical things that he's working through start to pay off a little bit more. And so while he's not quite impacting to the degree that I would like, I think he's far in a way, hopefully he's not far away from that. And hopefully we'll start to see that more as the season wears on. From the Discord, Marksman Unknown asks, what do we think of Ridley? Are we still going to keep him or move on next year since he's not getting paid this year? Do we still have him for one more year? Yes. Okay, Calvin Ridley's contract did toll due to the suspension, which means that once he is reinstated, presumably next year, he will be under contract for the final year of his rookie contract. And my stance on Ridley has been the same since March. I think there's probably a 99%, if not more, probability that he has played his last down in Atlanta. I think once he's reinstated, if the Falcons can trade him, they will. If they can't, they will cut him at their earliest convenience. Rise Up in the Discord asks, hey, Aaron, love the podcast. How have the linebackers and safeties played so far? Have they met your expectations? And Justin 201224 asks, how would you evaluate the safety play, specifically Grant and Hawkins, so far through the first 4 games? So I would say both groups have mostly met my expectations, the safeties in particular, of being league average starters. Grant, I thought the past 2 weeks has played his best ball at Cleveland. He was asked to be more of that sort of movable chess piece, lining up in the slot, playing in the box, rather than just basically being parked 15 to 20 yards, downfield as a deep safety. And I think that's kind of the best use for Richie Grant, being moved around the formation and showing that versatility. Hawkins has primarily been, more the deep guy the last 2 games. And I think he's been fine in that role. He's been fine as well when being asked to cover tight ends and whatnot. There's some good, there's some bad. It all balances out to him being okay, solid, decent, whatever word you want to use. That's kind of where I feel where he's been. As for the linebackers, they've also met my expectations, but I did not have high expectations for the linebacker. I thought they would kind of be slightly underwhelming starters, and that's kind of what they've been, in my opinion. There's been a lot of good, a lot of bad for Walker and Evans. Already talked a little bit about Mykal Walker and the missed tackles, which has been an issue the last 2 years. With Evans, the main issue is like I like him when he's being aggressive and shooting gaps and playing downhill, but when he's not doing those things successfully, like he's not bringing a whole lot to the table. Now, the one linebacker that I have been impressed with is Troy Anderson. Now, it's not because he's playing like super high level football, but he's off to a better start than I thought he would be, right? He's exceeded my expectations. The big question for me around Troy Anderson coming out of Montana State was the physicality. Did he have the physicality to hold up in the NFL? And that to me has been a non-issue through 4 games, right? The instincts are still a work in the progress, but tackling and taking on blocks to me were major issues of him in college, and they have been non-issues so far in the pros. And so hopefully the instincts and the awareness and all that stuff comes with more reps moving forward. So I like where Troy Anderson is at this point in time, and I'm much more, my hopes for him being much more than an underwhelming league average starter. Long term, I have higher hopes for him. Fallen Ass from the Discord: Aaron, what's your evaluation of the rookie class and the new rookies this year, 4 games in? So Fallen, I will punt this question till later in the season. I just want to get a little bit more data, but I will sit here and say, before we go into the specifics of these guys, but I will say London, Anderson, and Ritter, again, based solely off the preseason, have so far exceeded my expectations. Ebiketie and pretty much the rest have met my expectations. I was hoping for more from Ebiketie at this point in time, but I didn't necessarily have those expectations. But again, I think he's working his way, and certainly by year's end will live up to my hopes and dreams as far as that is concerned. Sebastian's dad on Twitter, or no, on the Discord, says, how was your visit on McGary Island been lately? And Mark QJ sent an email. My questions are, what are your thoughts on the offense, specifically Kaleb McGary this year? So McGary Island has been great so far this year. It has absolutely exceeded my expectations so far, which you guys know were not high. And as long as that continues, I'm going to sit here and claim all the credit. I'm going to sit here and say, I told you so. McGary Island was going to be great, even though I didn't really think that. But basically, I'm going to roll with the tide on this, pun intended, on this one. If he continues to play at a high level in the coming weeks and months, then I'll sit here and be like, yeah, I told you guys, I'm the smartest man in the world. McGary Island's a great place. I've been trying to tell you guys you should vacation here each and every day for the last, 4 years, right? But if he starts to struggle, and there may be an uptick in competition over the next couple of weeks, you got Joe Tryon, you got Nick Bosa, Sam Hubbard, Joey Bosa a little bit later in the season, and if he starts, the tide tends to ebb and wane and wax and whatever, then I'll be like, well, guys, what did you expect? I told you guys, like, he wasn't going to be great. Like, he was better. And my whole point was not that he was good. My point was that, like, he was better than people gave him credit for, and he showed that early in the season and blah 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 blah. So I'm not going to be out in front of this one. In all honesty, I will roll with the tide on this one. I do not want to be washed away with the surf on that one by dying on the Kaleb McGary Island hill, so to speak. I've heard a lot of people talk about, him being on his path to earning a second contract, and I think that's fair to say that he's on the path. Again, we got a ways to go. We got a lot of competition, premium competition, and when it comes to paying these offensive tackles, these right tackles, if we're talking like $7 million a year or whatever, okay, that's one thing. Then you can kind of be this one-dimensional player, this outstanding run blocker and a decent pass protector at $7 million a year. But when you're talking like 10, 12 million a year, which is what the premium right tackles are being asked to be paid, and if he continues on this path, maybe he's in that market. I need my guy to be a little bit more than just a kind of one-dimensional run blocker, and you need to be able to go up against the Nick Bosas and the Joey Bosas and potentially the TJ Watts and JJ Watts later in the season, the Odafe Oways and all those guys. And show me that you're a little bit more one-dimensional and be a little bit more two-dimensional. So we'll see. Again, Kaleb McGary has been great so far. As long as things are going well, it's been great. But the minute it starts to go, the tide turns on him. I don't know. Let's pump the brakes on that. So I'm just gonna ride the wave on that one, pun intended. But that's it, guys. Really appreciate you guys submitting your questions. You can do so via Twitter at Locked On Falcons, via Facebook at Locked On Falcons. Send an email to lockedonfalcons@mail.com. You leave a comment here on the Locked On Falcons YouTube channel, or hit me up on the Locked On Falcons Discord. Link in the description below if you want to join that. And guys, we thank you for making Locked On Falcons, your first listen each and every day. Guys, really appreciate it. But always, for that second listen, check out Locked On Sports Atlanta now, especially on Roku and Amazon Fire TV, Locked On Braves, Locked On Hawks, Locked On Bulldogs, so much more, as well as check out Peacock and Williamson breaking down all 32 teams, giving you that expert analysis from Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson, free and available on all the same podcast platforms that you're checking out Locked On Falcons, including YouTube. So guys, that's going to do it for us here. Really appreciate it. Of course, tomorrow is Crossover Thursday, where Locked On Bucks co-host David Harrison will be joining me to preview this upcoming matchup. And I'm already going to spoil to you guys what to me is going to be the most compelling matchups. I feel like it's going to be Drew Dalman versus Vita Vea and AJ Terrell versus Mike Evans. Those are the matchups I'm going to be focused on. We'll see if we can come up with some other matchups that should be focused on, but I'm sure you guys will also be focused on those. So spoiler alert, that's what we're going to talk about on tomorrow's episode. At least I know I'm going to talk about them. So we'll see what else David brings to the table for a Crossover Thursday on tomorrow's episode. But guys, really appreciate it. Till then.